No one has been listening to our veterans, including the VA, including the CIA, including the DOD, frankly, including a majority of Congress, and all of us who waited too long to get in this issue.
Hello, my name's Karen Lowe. I'm the widow of Stephen Lowe, who served 15 years in the British Army. Steve's battalion got deployed to the Gulf, the first Gulf War, and that was probably the worst time of our lives.
Hi, I'm Rodney Street. I was a specialist in the U.S. Army, stationed in Bamberg, Kitzingen, when we came down with orders to go over to the first Gulf War for Desert Shield and what was to be Desert Storm as well.
I served in the United States Army. I was assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division, 4-5 Air Defense Artillery, Sea Battery, deployed with the 1st Cavalry Division for Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and Desert Calm.
Prior to deploying, we received our vaccinations in Kitzingen, multiple vaccines. I can't recall what they all were.
All I can remember about that was they took us to a gymnasium and put us in a line, and you just went to about 8 or 10 different stations. You either received a shot or a pill or something. So it was quite a few shots. I know we got I can never pronounce it right, gamma globulin, something like that shot that hurt really, really bad. I believe we also received the anthrax shots that day, and quite a few other things to make us deployable.
We didn't sign anything, and it certainly wasn't voluntary. We were sent down, put in a line, and went through and got our shots. So there was nothing voluntary about it, and there was nothing to sign.
He left the army in 92, and he was quite, he was well, he was fit, but while he was in the Gulf, after they had the injections, he was paralysed from his neck down. He said he just really couldn't move out of his wagon because John Major was going over. He got a roasting for it. Let's face it, you're in a war, you don't want to be sleeping in the back of an ammunition wagon not being able to move.
I do not remember anybody saying it was volunteer. If you did not take the shots, that made you non-deployable. So you pretty much had to take the shots or face the consequences.
The veterans were not notified. We were told that the reason they weren't is we didn't want the Iraqis to know what we were protecting the troops against.
This is Ted Kennedy. After the Persian Gulf victory, there's unfinished business here at home. In a moment, Senator Al Simpson and I will face off. Al, all Americans share a sense of pride over our victory in the Persian Gulf and a sense of relief that our casualties were so low. I commend President Bush for his leadership and all the courageous men and women who risked their lives for our country. The unprecedented international alliance against Saddam Hussein offers hope for lasting peace in the Middle East.
What our intelligence tells us is that there were only 2 sites that had the chemical munitions in it. The Iraqis, what they did was move the chemical munitions out of sites like the bunkers and other facilities, several of them, and moved them into the open and covered them up. So we agree with what the Iraqis have given us, the information, and have no other information to disagree with it at this time.
People had difficulty breathing. Our chemical detectors went off multiple times. They said that there was no threat. I'm not so sure about that.
I cleared several vehicles during the war, making sure there was no live ammunition in there, making sure no one was hiding in there, and a lot of these have been shot by our rockets and stuff from the helicopters and from the tanks. I was also exposed to sarin gas. I received a letter from the Department of Defense that I was in an area where we received low levels of sarin gas while I was there, and it was low enough that it did not set off the alarms, but we were in it for an extended period of time.
If you look back and you talk about the folks that were exposed to chemical warfare, at first they said nobody's exposed to it. Then it was maybe 100 people were exposed to it. Then it's 1,000. Then possibly up to 10,000. But with the winds and everything else, it's fairly unlikely that the minimal exposure would cause any health-related issues. So in regards to, it almost feels a little bit like the Vietnam veterans that I feel so sorry for, the way they were treated and things that they went through. And the Agent Orange, it started out that it couldn't do anything, and now it's causing cancers and everything else. And so in that regards, I think I'm not comparing it to the Vietnam War, but I'm comparing it to Agent Orange, where as time goes on, they say that there's more and more health issues that could have been caused from the exposures over in the Gulf War, similar to Agent Orange.
I saw a lot of people had stomach problems just like me, because we deployed not long after we went in and got all those shots and everything. It may have taken a few days for the worst of it, and it's been so long, I don't remember if I actually started getting having stomach problems before I arrived in country. But I do know once I got there and got in the heat and the humidity, drinking, they just had cases upon cases of water set in there. We ended up drinking the water hot at times because we didn't have a way to cool it. So quite a few people were having stomach problems. You would have to sometime wait in line to use the restroom.
And I would base my conclusions about the health of Persian Gulf veterans not on these self-selected healthcare programs like the registry or the CCEP, but on good, sound, scientific studies. And that's my message to you.
Okay. And my message to you is that obviously we can't depend on the Department of Defense or the CIA to encourage you to do the studies you need to do, so that when you get veterans who are coming to you with serious physical problems, that you begin the studies and not wait for them.
It's frowned upon if you complain or you're all the time going to sick call. Is frowned upon very heavily. At least it was during my time of service. I don't know about the current time of people in service now, but it was highly unfavorable for you if you're continually going to see a doctor. And so a lot of people would just, as we say, suck it up and drive on.
There were past studies done, in fact, by the DoD, if my memory is correct, dealing with the potentially dangerous effects of pyridostigmine bromide. And he was very, very concerned about the use of that drug.
The bromide pills, we did not have to take those until we were actually in country, and we were basically told, open your mouth, put the pill in, let me see it, drink, okay.
A little bit later in the Gulf War, some folks got sick while we were there. We were given a bromide pill while we were over there. So it was supposed to help with any biological attacks.
Pyridostigmine bromide, the PB, and you did what I usually do. Since I can't say it well, I just say PB. But this was to protect against sarin exposure. This is a drug that is used for degenerative nerve disease. And it's not to be used in the way that the DoD used it unless they had permission from the FDA. It becomes, in essence, because it is a drug used for another reason, a experimental drug. This experimental drug was, the FDA gave the DoD permission to use PB. They had only two requirements. One, that they warn the soldiers that it is an experimental drug, which, by the way, our soldiers were ordered to take, which astounds me. An experimental drug in which our soldiers were ordered to take. They had one other requirement besides notifying our soldiers. They were supposed to keep records.
I don't know to this day what I was exposed to. Unfortunately, they can't find any of my records from when I was over there. And what I was told is that, like I said, with the burn pit fires and stuff towards the end, I had been told that many of our medical records were actually burnt prior to returning back to Germany.
Toxicological research indicates that PB, which the Gulf veterans took to protect themselves against the immediate life-threatening effects of nerve agents, may alter the metabolism of organophosphates in ways that activate delayed chronic effects of the brain. Moreover, exposure to combinations of these chemicals have shown in animal studies to be far more likely to cause morbidity and mortality than any of the chemicals acting alone.
You have had a very clear criticism of not just the VA, but the DoD and the President's Advisory Commission on Gulf War illnesses. I don't think you have many friends left in that community, and I'm concerned about it.
We were caught off guard because one evening when they finally blew up the bunker, no one had let us know. And when they blew up the bunker with the Iraqi ammunition in it, we had no idea, and we scattered for our flak jackets and our helmets. It literally sounded like an atomic bomb going off, and it was within a mile of us, a couple kilometers from us. And that we found out, shortly after that they had finally blew up the ammunition bunker.
And one of my friends was killed in action that day before anyone back here even knew there was a ground war going. 2 weeks prior, we were already doing a little bit of ground war, doing excursions, to draw them in on us. Jimmy was actually hit in the chest with an anti-tank round, pretty much from his waist up, midway, about right here up, was gone.
And nothing really was thought about it until later on in his life. When Steve started having backache and back problems, he had a couple of back operations. He came home from work. He literally said, "I've got a stinking headache." I turned around and he was flat on the floor.
I just am speaking for all spouses all over the country of our frustrations, watching our husbands go to war, fight for their country, willing to die for a country, and still today, if my husband was healthy and if it was laid before him that he would come home in this condition, I can guarantee my husband would still go to war. Knowing this, of how brave my husband is, and that he fought for his country, and so many other military wives are standing behind their husbands going through the same situation that I am, with children, we are just stressed out. We are just crying out for the government to do something for these brave men.
On numerous occasions, technicians trained to operate sophisticated detection equipment confirmed the presence of nerve and blister agents near U.S. troop positions in Iraq, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. Individual soldiers reported Scud attacks followed by toxic mists and powdery fallout. They reported dead animals in the desert and a notable lack of insects or other carrion scavengers on the carcasses. After the fighting stopped, U.S. forces detonated Iraq chemical munitions stored in bunkers at Camisea. To this day, many Gulf War veterans report the symptoms, memory loss, fatigue, muscle and joint pain, that can characterize a neurotoxic exposure. Routinely, all these reports have been dismissed, discounted, discredited, or denied. Some were dismissed as false positive readings. Others were discounted as detections below life-threatening levels. Still others were discredited as attributable only to operator error. Based on these denials, commanders sounded the all clear for U.S. troops to proceed unprotected against an invisible enemy. As a result, the number of U.S. Gulf War veterans presumed to have been exposed to some level of chemical warfare agents has climbed from 0 to 400 to 1,100 to 5,000 to 15,000 to more than 20,000.
We confirmed the presence of a blister agent, commonly referred to as mustard or HD, traces of phosgene, a non-persistent choking agent, and traces of phosgene oxime, a non-persistent blistering agent. While on the site, I observed a British soldier come in contact with the liquid while working to take a sample collection for transport out of the area. I personally observed the liquid effects on his wrist and concluded that he was exposed to a blistering agent based on the reaction of the liquid to skin contact. The soldier was decontaminated and transported to a hospital for medical treatment. To date, I have no information concerning the health condition of that soldier that was contaminated. The tapes were to be further analyzed along with the samples that were removed from the area by personnel in desert uniforms. I had no idea who these personnel were or what organization they represented. I was later given a Be Prepared mission to provide support to the British in their efforts to move the container out of the area for destruction.
DOD in 1995 did a study. And you know what their study concluded? Their study concluded that pyridostigmine bromide combined with DEET and combined with permethrin has a synergistic effect, much more than the additive effect. When you combine the three, it has a significant effect on lethality. I found it very interesting that in the Presidential Advisory Committee final report, the word significant was changed and it became a slight. The word significant went to slight. I found it interesting in reading New York Times articles that when the DOD itself had done the right research, New York Times, Wednesday, May 14th, headline, study leaks memory loss to nerve gas as in Gulf. The DOD does the research. The guy who does the research says, I think we've made an important finding, and the DOD attempts to minimize what their own research has done. On and on it goes. We have had testimony from witnesses here who have told us they were Dr. Tucker. Remember Dr. Tucker? Fired because he had the courage to go outside of the parameters established by the PAC. Dr. Myra Shayovitz, who's a physician who formerly worked at the VA hospital in Northampton, Massachusetts, believed that chemicals played a role. She developed a protocol for treatment, did not get her research funded. Dr. Claudia Miller, who you have had before this committee, also was in line to receive funding to look at chemicals, did not get funded. Dr. James Morse, after concluding that PB and DEET, when combined, produced toxic effects on cockroaches, was terminated from his employment with the Department of Agriculture. On and on and on it goes. When conclusions arise that seem to go beyond the paradigm established by the DOD and the VA, those researchers get the short shrift. I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I think the time is now to say thank you very much, DOD and VA. You've had your opportunity. You've had the last 5 years. You haven't done it.
Pretty much all my major joints ache all the time. I have to go in and get injections in my lower back and hips every 6 months. just so I can move around. Without those, I get where I can hardly move and end up using the cane.
You're hurting now physically, and that's clear. And we very much appreciate your bravery and willingness to come here today. Do you know of people with whom you associated people in your area during the war who are suffering illnesses that might be attributed to the conflict?
Yes, I know a few in my area.
Yes, sir, he knows a few in our area.
And similar problems to yours, or just other kinds of?
Different kind of problem, maybe rashes.
All different problems, mainly rashes. Joint pains. Those type of problems.
The driver and I jumped from the vehicle, giving the signals for chemicals. I approached the MP controlling traffic to ask why he wasn't in MOP level 4. He told me the alarm was false. I was angry and removed my mask. I now feel that was a mistake.
We had to burn all of our trash and refuge, and we would basically take it out into the desert, dig a hole, put it all in the hole, light it on fire, and we would have to sit there and man it until the fire went out, make sure everything was completely burned, and then cover it up. The other type of burn pit that we used was we had latrine duty, which basically you had to pull the cans out from underneath the latrines where people went to the bathroom, and you would use a mixture of MoGas and diesel fuel, and you would light this on fire, and you would have to stand there and burn it. You would be breathing these fumes in, and depending on which way the wind was blowing that day, a lot of times it blew back into the encampment, but you would be breathing this in, and you have to sit there and stir it the entire time. And once you burned it down to nothing but ash were left, you would take it a little bit further out, dig a hole, and bury the ashes in the hole. So you were breathing the ash, the fumes, everything.
Towards the end, we were sitting in the oil well filled fires for numerous days. One of the things our unit was tasked for was providing security for the peace talks at the end of the ground war, which was heavy smoke, heavy breathing. So many people have difficulties breathing at that time. After returning from the Gulf War, several of us did get sick. I was one of them that within a few days of returning, I was sent to the hospital, where I was there for a week with significant breathing issues, almost severe cold virus type sickness with vomiting, diarrhea, and so I was there for about a week, and was better afterwards, and sent back to my unit.
I learned just in the last 2 weeks, in fact, that the Centers for Disease Control did not provide the Senate Banking Committee with a complete list of all the potential pathogens that were supplied to Iraq during the 1980s. They revealed this to a researcher, Dr. Leonard Cole at Rutgers, in 1995. The CDC apparently sent 80-plus samples.
You're suggesting that
DCI Admiral Studman directed the CIA performing a comprehensive review of all relevant intelligence information. Our study concluded no chemical weapon or biological agents were used by the Iraqis, and facilities now known to contain biological weapon agents were not bombed. Under what basis could he have made that statement? What data would he have had would the director of the CIA have had to have made such a sweeping statement, in your judgment?
He would have had no basis whatsoever to make that statement on the basis of the information that I had in my possession and on the basis of the information that has subsequently been declassified up to this point and provided to the public.
What would he have pointed to? I mean, if he were in the room now, what would he have said was the basis for it, in your judgment?
I really can't speak to that, Mr. Chairman. I mean, to me, this is a very, very obvious problem, a very obvious circumstance. The intelligence information and the information coming from the people in the theater that we heard just earlier today was quite clear. The munitions were present. They were forward deployed to the lowest unit level. They were in Kuwait as well as Iraq. Contrary to what the CIA maintains to this day, these chemical weapons were in Kuwait. The evidence is overwhelming that they were in Kuwait.
Everyone was puzzled, but as time passed, still with no diagnosis and Steve getting worse, I started getting very frustrated with the MOD more than anyone. The hospital had exhausted all their tests that they could do. They got the biopsies of these lesions on Steve's brain, but they couldn't diagnose them. They couldn't tell us what they were. They said they'd not seen them before. They knew they weren't cancer. I cried out for help with the MOD, but I just felt like they were making excuses.
One of the ways that was operated with something was
Also from one of the Marines that were operating with Gunny Sergeant Graff, I'm sorry.
He is ordnance officer.
He's a what?
Ordnance officer.
He's an ordnance officer.
He was with the other.
He was with Gunny Sergeant Graff.
And 7 members of his unit.
Several members from
7
members of his unit
were sent to Portsmouth.
was sent to Portsmouth
Naval Hospital.
Portsmouth Naval Hospital
To be observed after the war.
to be observed after the war.
Only 2 of them
Only 2 of them
are still alive.
are now living.
Autoimmune issues,
These lesions, they were just multiplying.
Chronic fatigue,
multiple joint issues,
fibromyalgia,
Bleed on the brain.
muscle issues,
gastrointestinal reflux disease,
diarrhea,
Found a tumour.
my thyroid is shot,
vomiting,
Projectile vomiting.
Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis,
migraine headaches.
respiratory issues,
Couldn't stand the light.
I have rheumatoid arthritis.
But I've got COPD as well. I've never smoked a cigarette in my life.
I've even been on a walker at times.
We all got back, and of course we didn't know about Gulf War illness or Gulf War sickness at the time. So as soon as we got back, like I said, several of us was in the hospital. I've stayed in touch with a few people from my unit to this day. Actually got in touch with them probably 15 years after the ground war. And as we were talking, they have the exact same issues that I do.
I know very few people that are rated for Gulf War illness or syndrome, but I know several people that have all the presumptives, but yet they rate them for something else.
It strikes me, and this is my primary point, it strikes me that the VA's approach is to, as to the cause of Gulf War illnesses, this research program is designed to find out what it isn't, not what the problem is.
The problem is when you see a doctor, they don't want to send you out of there and say, hey, we can't figure this out, so we're going to say that it's lupus. We're going to say that it's you got osteoporosis. They're going to give you a diagnosis. Well, once you get a diagnosis, you're not eligible, or it's not compensatable to be an undiagnosed Gulf War illness.
Since September of 1996, 1995, we redesigned the registry, and there's a specific question at the end of the registry examination, after the physician has written the symptoms and the diagnosis, and it asks the physician to specifically designate whether they feel the patient has an unexplained illness, yes or no.
I can say that I am being compensated at 100% rate, so if I was totally disabled, but it's primarily from PTSD and IBS and a couple other small things. So, and when I was no longer able to work, for example, I applied for migraines for consistent headaches and things as related to the Gulf War illness. Well, those were denied. But when I was no longer able to work from all these things, they gave me what was called 100% individual unemployability. So I'm getting paid if I was 100% disabled, but it's really not from Gulf War illness other than the PTSD.
Cancer is coming out more predominantly now. I don't know if it's due to aging. I don't know if it's due to the exposures we have, but out of my friends here in South Florida, probably over half of them that were in Desert Storm have had some type of cancer.
Of course, the Veterans Administration doesn't necessarily agree with many of the diagnoses.
By the Department of Veterans Affairs standards, I am 100% total and permanent disabled.
When I spoke to vets in the state of Vermont and in testimony that we have heard before this committee, we have heard from women who believe that they have been made ill with symptoms not dissimilar from their husbands as a result of sexual contact or whatever. There was a case in Vermont of a woman who was jogging, I guess, 5 miles a day, and after a while became so ill she could barely walk without help. Is that anecdotal? Is that just something that happens to people, or have you, in your research, developed any patterns to suggest that women, or maybe even kids, we heard some testimony, you recall, from a woman whose kids were ill as well. Do you have any conclusions on that?
In this study, we did not do any original research. We looked at the research that has already been published, and in context of the conclusion that have been reached, in context of some other issues that were relevant. We did not collect original information from veterans.
Based on your review of the research, what should I tell some women in the state of Vermont who believe that they have been made ill? Is there research to suggest that that is in fact the case, or that there is no correlation?
It's quite plausible. They were exposed to wide, variety of exposure agents. We do not understand the precise mechanisms, and it's quite possible that their symptoms might be due to those exposure.
But that's a question that remains unanswered, like many.
One of the other things veterans are looking at also, and have been requesting, is to look at their children. Like I know I have a friend that lives in Alabama. His daughter has all kinds of issues that are similar to what her father has. And like me, my daughter has a bad problem with anxiety and stomach issues. And she's had this since she was a baby. So the veterans are asking, please look at our kids. Make sure there's nothing wrong with them.
And then they have a reason to cover the truth.
They have a reason to cover the truth.
It's because they have done so in the past to veterans of World War II. They have done so in the past.
They have done so in the past with World War II.
Veterans.
Just look at
Veterans.
first letter.
V-E.
B-E.
No, Vitamins. Vitamins.
Batteries?
Vitamins.
Veterans.
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 And also, with Agent Orange.
Also with Agent Orange. Vietnam.
And the main reason is the most down to money.
The main reason it boils down to money.
They don't want to be held responsible.
They don't want to be held responsible
For only people who are now sick.
for all the people who are now sick.
And for the ones who have already
And for the ones that have already died.
We also learned in some of the studies that I indicated, there are at least 2 studies which now indicate, Dr. Haley being one, that there may be actual neurological damage. All right? Now that is something that is pretty definitive, right? If somebody has neurological damage, why aren't we testing now 10,000 people to see if there's neurological damage and if it correlates to what we call Persian Gulf illness?
The alarm on the mass spectrometer went off with a full reading of sulfur mustard. We saw the weapons that were sitting there. They were .155 rounds with bands around them. They also had skull and crossbones tapes with red and yellow tape around them. They were from the United States. A little bit farther along in the same ammunition storage area, my mass spectrometer alarm went off.
You say they were from the United States.
Yes, sir.
The Iraqi weapons?
Yes, sir.
But they were U.S.?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Throughout the whole ammunition storage area, there was weapons there from the United States, Jordan, and Holland.
Exposures to chemicals and other agents in our atmosphere, on our grounds, the chemicals that we're putting within our environment. These have caused, in my opinion, have caused his situation, his symptoms to move more rapidly.
But yes, I believe the DOD themselves, they're not telling us the whole truth.
I have several friends that have fought cancer and either won or lost.
He passed away in December 2010 at the age of only 51. He'd been ill for a couple of years, but no one could tell us what was wrong. Therefore, no one could treat him.
My personal belief is, since there's no family issues with any of this, is that it's all because of the things that I've went through the Gulf War.
If some people feel that it's going to take so long that no one's going to care in the end and they can just outlast the various investigations, they're just wrong. They're just wrong.